Well, it's time to talk about cars in Gran Turismo 7 1.29, and we're kicking off, of course, with the 1965 Honda RA272 Grand Prix machine. Don't even bother comparing it to a modern-day F1 car. That would be a stupid comparison to make. You could probably beat this thing with a modern-day sports car. In real life, at least, the right sports car, maybe something like a Cayman GT4. Wouldn't surprise me at all. And I was totally wrong. When it comes to driving this car in the game, I thought it would be a challenge. I really did think this was going to be one of those cars that people would end up hating because of how challenging it would be by modern standards, unforgiving, slippery, floating around on the track at higher speeds because of the relative lack of downforce and stability. It weighs less than a half a metric ton, and even without a huge amount of power, it's a very quick little car. Now, all of that is technically true, and yet it's really forgiving and really, really grippy. Now, I will say that could be a combination of the Japanese car effect, which we can unofficially call it. Gran Turismo, of course, always favours Japanese cars, much in the same way that Forza tends to favour American cars in many occasions. But this one feels like it might be a little bit glitched. Because on racing tyres, Racing Hards, which I drove it in the review for the update yesterday on the channel, it just feels ridiculously good. It feels like a borderline ground effect fan car, like a Chaparral 2J. But then, if you put it on sports tyres, it still feels too good, except now you can race it in even lower point events, so it's even more OP. So to me, if you do want the full, or at least the closest thing to, an authentic, old school experience with this car, and again, I would like to clarify, I've never driven one of these in real life, of course, so what do I know? But what I imagine this car would have been like, at least by modern standards, then I would probably recommend slapping it on comfort tyres, if you want to get that authentic kind of vibe. Now, with that being said, realistic or not, it's really useful. This thing is properly quick. You can fit it with NOS, you can turbo it to get way more power out of it, well over 400 horses from the baseline 228, and as mentioned, it's less than half a metric ton, 498 kilos. So the power to weight is fantastic, even stock, even more so when tuned. And again, in standard form, even the point level isn't that crazy. With Racing Hards on it, it's 628 points. This is kind of the antithesis to the Red Bull Junior syndrome, which I used to talk about in Gran Turismo 6, especially where that car just wasn't quick enough to justify being well over 700 points. Now, of course, that has been mostly solved, if not completely. This one feels like the opposite. Like, this needs to have a way higher point level because it's so OP, and when you put it on those sports tyres, it gets even better in terms of usefulness. Now, here, for example, I'm using it on sports tyres, and it's still fantastic. Now granted, the cars I'm up against of course aren't the best things around, but you can use this to earn cash at the 700 point event at Le Mans, and from what I've heard from people already doing so, it's one hell of a machine. Now it's not as affordable as a Red Bull Junior, it's 2.5 million credits from the legendary dealership, but I will definitely say 100% this is worth the investment, because it ticks so many boxes for me of making a good car in Gran Turismo. One, it's a debut. That's always more interesting than a returning face. Two, it's highly collectible. So of course, from the legendary dealer perspective, that's the very least that it has to accomplish, and it certainly does. Number three, it's really useful for the money. And number four, the real cream of the cream, it's fun. It's just really nice to use. It looks great. Watching those little toothpick-sized drive shafts spinning their nuts off at the back end, and then feeling how great it is to drive, the great handling, the surprisingly good grip. And sure, you can overcook it, but it's really, really nice to work with. And you can even steer it with the throttle to some degree, like I was expecting it to be. But as I said, it is more forgiving than I thought it would. It's got fantastic cabin view, fantastic cockpit view, great bonnet cam if you want to use that as well. Lovely little livery base. Of course, I'm using the cursed Lotus livery on a Honda, as I like to do with all of my Grand Prix reviews. Just slap a livery from something totally different on there. But let's be honest, imagine how cool it would be for Lotus to return if it were in the form of a classic Grand Prix car. Coming back to Gran Turismo, get a couple of these old school Grand Prix machines. I don't see that happening. There was at least one other car like this, which I believe was a Pebble Beach Gran Turismo award winner, I think it was. So we may well see another. But for now, it's one hell of a debut for this category of car in the series, and it really does live up to what I think the expectations, for me at least, and I'm sure for some of you as well, were. to be a great car, a fun car, a useful car, a collectible car, and even, all things considered, not an overly expensive one. $2.5 million isn't really that crazy. That's less than, what, an Audi R18 Le Mans prototype, and this is a far more interesting car than that. And with that exploit of using it at Le Mans, it's not really an exploit, but you know what I mean, you can easily pay for itself. A couple of races and you're done. So ultimately, yeah, this is easily the highlight of the update for me. It's a fantastic addition to the game, and one which I'm genuinely all-round really happy with. The only even possible criticism for me about the car is that it feels too good, which is one hell of a criticism to have, because at least if they don't nerf it, it makes it really useful and really OP. So of course I would love to hear your thoughts on the car as well if you've already bought it, as I know plenty of you have. Were you disappointed by it, happy with it? Are you using it, as I know some of you are, for grinding and earning cash? Maybe if you found certain events that you can sneak it in with on different tyres. Let me know all of that down below, and of course stick around on the channel over the coming days, wherein I will be featuring the other cars from the update as well. But until then, I'll see you next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.